My brother looked me straight in the eye and said he deserved my apartment for half price because we're family. When I refused, my parents called me greedy and ungrateful. That was the moment I realized I'd been living in a carefully constructed lie my entire life. Let me paint you a picture of what family loyalty really looks like when there's money involved. I'm Sarah, 32 years old, and I thought I knew my family. I thought I understood the unspoken rules we lived by. But sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who'll surprise you the most, and not in a good way. It all started 3 months ago when I decided to sell my downtown apartment. I'd been living there for 5 years, saved every penny to buy it, worked overtime shifts at the hospital where I'm a nurse just to afford the down payment. This wasn't some gift from mommy and daddy. This was blood, sweat, and tears turned into brick and mortar. The apartment was gorgeous. 2 bedrooms, exposed brick walls, huge windows overlooking the city skyline. I'd spent weekends painting every room, installing new fixtures, turning it into something that felt like home. The real estate market was hot, and my agent said we could easily get $400,000 for it. Maybe more. I was excited. I'd been promoted to head nurse, and I wanted to buy a house with a yard. Maybe get a dog. Start the next chapter of my life. I called my mom to share the good news, expecting congratulations and maybe some help choosing paint colors for my future home. Instead, she got quiet. Really quiet. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. Well, you know your brother has always admired that place. My brother Jake. 3 years younger than me, still living in our parents' basement at 29. Jake, who'd dropped out of college twice, who'd never held a job for more than 6 months, who somehow always had money for the latest gaming setup but never enough to contribute to household expenses. That Jake. Mom, what does Jake have to do with anything? I asked, already feeling a familiar knot forming in my chest. He's been talking about wanting to move out, start fresh. You know how hard it's been for him to find his footing. Hard to find his footing. That's what we called it when Jake got fired from his last job for showing up late consistently. That's what we called it when he maxed out 3 credit cards and needed Dad to bail him out. That's what we called it when he crashed his car and needed to borrow Mom's for 8 months. I'm sure he'll find a great place, I said carefully. The market's got lots of options. But I already knew where this was heading. In my family, there was an unspoken rule. Jake was the baby. Jake needed protection. Jake deserved chances. And I was the responsible one, the one who had it all figured out, the one who didn't need help. The next day, Jake showed up at my door with a coffee and that sheepish grin that had gotten him out of trouble our entire childhood. He sat on my couch, the couch I'd saved for months to buy, and looked around like he was already measuring the space for his stuff. Sarah, I've been thinking, he started, and I knew exactly what was coming. I heard you're selling this place. That's right. Well, I was wondering. I mean, I've always loved this apartment. You know that, right? I've told you how perfect it is. He had mentioned it. Usually when he was drunk and crashing on my couch after another failed relationship or job interview. Usually when he was feeling sorry for himself and needed someone to listen to his problems. It really is perfect, I agreed, waiting for the punchline. So here's what I'm thinking. Instead of selling it to some stranger, why don't you sell it to me? Keep it in the family, you know? I felt a flicker of something. Not quite hope, but curiosity. Maybe Jake was finally getting serious about his life. Maybe he'd saved some money, gotten pre-approved for a mortgage, was ready to be a real adult. That's actually not a bad idea, I said slowly. Have you talked to a lender about financing? Jake laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, come on, Sarah. You know I can't get approved for a $400,000 mortgage. My credit's still recovering from that rough patch. Rough patch. His credit was destroyed because he'd defaulted on student loans, missed car payments, and racked up debt on 5 different credit cards. But we called it a rough patch. So what exactly are you suggesting? I asked, though I was starting to get a sick feeling in my stomach. Family discount, he said with that grin. 200,000. Cash. I stared at him. Jake, that's half the market value. But think about it. No realtor fees, no staging costs, no uncertainty. Guaranteed sale to someone who'll love it as much as you do. Where would you get 200,000 in cash? Mom and Dad are going to help me out. They're refinancing the house. And there it was. The truth behind the family discount. My parents were going to take out a loan against their home, the home they'd almost paid off after 30 years of mortgage payments, to help Jake buy my apartment for half price. Jake, I can't accept that, I said. This apartment is worth 400,000. I need that money for my down payment. His expression changed. The sheepish grin disappeared, replaced by something harder. Sarah, come on. We're family. Family helps family. I am helping family. I work double shifts to pay for Mom's birthday dinners. I've lent you money that you've never paid back. I drove you to job interviews for 2 years. That's different. How is it different? Because this is about being greedy. You're choosing money over family. Greedy. That word hit me like a physical blow. I'd never been greedy. I'd been careful, responsible, strategic. I'd made sacrifices to afford this apartment. I'd eaten ramen for months to save for the down payment. I'd worked holidays and weekends to pay the mortgage. Jake, I'm not being greedy. I'm being fair. If you want to buy my apartment, you need to pay market value. Fair? He stood up, and suddenly he looked like a stranger. Fair would be recognizing that I've never had the opportunities you've had. Fair would be understanding that some of us didn't get the lucky breaks. Lucky breaks. As if my nursing degree was luck. As if my promotion was luck. As if my financial stability was some cosmic accident rather than the result of 10 years of careful planning and hard work. What opportunities did I have that you didn't? I asked. You were always the smart one. The responsible one. Everything came easy to you. Nothing came easy to me, Jake. I worked for everything I have. And now you're working to screw over your own brother. The conversation ended badly. Jake stormed out, slamming my door hard enough to rattle the windows. I sat on my couch, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Had I been unreasonable? Was I being selfish? I called my best friend Emma, who listened to the whole story and then said something that stuck with me. Sarah, if a stranger offered you half price for your apartment, what would you say? I'd say no, obviously. So why is your brother different? Because he's family. And family means you have to take a $200,000 loss? When she put it that way, it sounded insane. But family dynamics aren't logical. They're emotional, complicated, loaded with decades of history and guilt and expectation. 3 days later, my mom called. I should have known she wouldn't stay out of it. My mom, who'd spent 30 years smoothing over Jake's mistakes, who'd always found a way to make his problems everyone else's responsibility. Sarah, honey, your brother is really upset. I can imagine. He feels like you don't care about family. Mom, I love Jake. But I can't sell him my apartment for half price. It's not about the money, sweetheart. It's about supporting each other. It is about the money, Mom. It's about $200,000. You don't need all that money. You have a good job, you're stable. Jake is struggling. There it was. The assumption that had governed our family for decades. I was fine, so I didn't need help. Jake was struggling, so everyone else needed to sacrifice for him. Mom, I need that money for my down payment. I've been planning this for years. You can get a smaller house. Why should I get a smaller house so Jake can get a discount on my apartment? Because that's what family does. The conversation went in circles for an hour. My mom couldn't understand why I was being so difficult. I couldn't understand why my financial goals were less important than Jake's convenience. But the real shock came 2 days later when my dad called. My dad, who'd always been the voice of reason in our family, who'd taught me about hard work and responsibility. "Sarah, I need you to reconsider this apartment situation." "Dad, Jake can't afford my apartment." "We're going to help him." "By taking out a loan against your house?" "It's an investment in Jake's future." "What about your future? What about retirement?" "We'll figure it out." That's when I realized the extent of the dysfunction. My parents were willing to jeopardize their financial security to enable Jake's entitlement. They'd convinced themselves that giving him what he wanted was the same as helping him. "Dad, this doesn't help Jake. It just teaches him that he doesn't have to work for what he wants." "Sarah, I'm disappointed in you. This isn't the daughter I raised." The daughter he raised. The daughter who'd been responsible and hardworking and self-sufficient since she was 12 years old. The daughter who'd never asked for help because she'd been taught that she was the strong one, the capable one, the one who could handle anything. What daughter did you raise, Dad? One who puts family first. I've always put family first. But I won't bankrupt myself to do it. That conversation ended badly too. My dad hung up on me, something he'd never done in my entire life. For the next 2 weeks, I got the silent treatment. No calls, no texts, no invitations to family dinners. It was like I'd been excommunicated for the crime of refusing to subsidize my brother's lifestyle. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe family really did mean taking a loss to help someone you love. Maybe I was being greedy, just like Jake had said. But then something happened that changed everything. I was at the hospital, working a late shift, when I overheard 2 of my colleagues talking about real estate. One of them mentioned that her brother-in-law was a real estate agent who specialized in investment properties. "He's always looking for good deals," she said. "Places he can flip or rent out. Investment properties." The words hit me like a lightning bolt. I excused myself and called Jake. "Jake, I have a question about the apartment." "Finally coming to your senses?" he said, and I could hear the smugness in his voice. "What are you planning to do with it?" "What do you mean? Are you going to live there? Or is this an investment?" Long pause. Too long. "I'm going to live there, obviously." "For how long?" "Sarah, what's with the interrogation?" "Just curious about your long-term plans." "I don't know. A few years, maybe." "Why?" Something in his tone told me I was onto something. I ended the call and did something I'd never done before. I called my cousin Lisa, Jake's ex-girlfriend from 3 years ago. They'd dated for 2 years, and she knew him better than anyone. "Lisa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "What's going on?" I told her about the apartment situation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Sarah, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Jake's been talking about flipping properties for months. He watches all those house flipping shows and thinks he can make easy money." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "He's been saying that if he could just get his hands on a property below market value, he could fix it up and sell it for a profit. He's been looking for investors." "Investors?" "People who would lend him money to buy properties cheap and then split the profits when he sells." The pieces started falling into place. Jake didn't want my apartment because he loved it. He wanted it because he saw an opportunity to make money. He'd buy it from me for $200,000, maybe put $50,000 into renovations using money from his mysterious investors, and then sell it for $450,000. That would be a $200,000 profit. More money than Jake had ever made in his entire life. And my parents were going to help him do it by refinancing their house. I felt sick. Not just disappointed or angry, but physically ill. This wasn't about family loyalty or Jake finding his footing. This was about using family connections to get access to a business opportunity. I called my parents that night and told them what I'd learned. Sarah, that's ridiculous, my mom said. Jake wouldn't do that. Mom, call Lisa yourself. Ask her. I don't need to call anyone. I know my son. Do you? Because I'm starting to think none of us know Jake as well as we thought. My dad got on the phone. Sarah, even if what you're saying is true, what's wrong with Jake making some money? He needs a break. What's wrong is that he's using family guilt to get access to a $200,000 investment opportunity. What's wrong is that you're risking your retirement to help him do it. We're helping our son. You're enabling him. That conversation ended badly too. My parents hung up on me, convinced that I was making up stories to justify my selfishness. But I wasn't done investigating. I called my Uncle Mike, my dad's brother, who worked in real estate. I asked him what he thought about Jake's plan. Jake called me last month, Uncle Mike said. He wanted to know about fix and flip loans. Said he had a lead on a property he could get below market value. What did you tell him? I told him it was a risky business, especially for someone with no experience. But he seemed pretty confident he could make it work. Did he mention that the property was my apartment? No, he just said it was a family connection. A family connection. That's what I was to Jake. Not a sister, not someone who'd supported him for years, but a business opportunity. I made a decision that night. I called my real estate agent and told her to move forward with listing the apartment at full market value. I wasn't going to subsidize Jake's business venture, and I wasn't going to let my parents jeopardize their financial security to do it either. The apartment went on the market on a Tuesday. By Friday, I had 3 offers, all above asking price. The bidding war I'd expected materialized, and I accepted an offer for $420,000. Jake found out through my mom, who called me crying. Sarah, you've broken your brother's heart. Mom, Jake was planning to flip the apartment. This was never about him needing a place to live. That's not true. Call Lisa. Call Uncle Mike. Ask them yourself. But she wouldn't. None of them would. They'd rather believe that I was a greedy, selfish daughter than accept that Jake had been manipulating all of us. The final confrontation happened at my cousin's wedding 2 weeks later. I'd debated whether to go, knowing it would be awkward, but I'd promised to be there months earlier. The moment I walked into the reception, I could feel the tension. My extended family had heard about the apartment situation, and sides had been chosen. Some people avoided eye contact. Others whispered when they thought I wasn't looking. Jake was there with his new girlfriend, a woman I'd never met who kept staring at me like I was some kind of villain. My parents were polite but distant, the way they'd act around a stranger. I made it through the ceremony, but the reception was harder. I was sitting at a table with some cousins when Jake approached with his girlfriend in tow. Sarah, I want you to meet Amanda. Amanda looked me up and down with obvious distaste. So you're the sister who won't help family. I'm the sister who won't be taken advantage of, I replied calmly. Same thing, Jake said. You chose money over family. I chose fairness over manipulation. Manipulation? Jake's voice got louder, drawing attention from other tables. I offered to buy your apartment, and you rejected me because you're greedy. You offered to buy my apartment for half price so you could flip it and make a profit. That's not true. Then why did you call Uncle Mike about fix and flip loans? Jake's face went pale. How do you know about that? Because I asked. Because I wanted to understand why you really wanted my apartment. I was just exploring options. Options for what, Jake? For my future. Your future as a real estate investor using my apartment as your first flip? The table had gone completely silent. Amanda was staring at Jake with confusion and growing horror. My parents, who'd been sitting nearby, had moved closer to hear the conversation. Jake, my mom said quietly, what is she talking about? Mom, it's not. Yes, I thought maybe I could do some improvements and then sell it for a profit, I finished. There's nothing wrong with that, Jake said defensively. People do it all the time. People do it with their own money, Jake. Not with family discounts and loans against their parents' house. My dad stepped forward. Jake, is this true? Were you planning to flip Sarah's apartment? I thought maybe eventually, if I decided to move. You told us you wanted to live there, my mom said, her voice shaking. You said you needed a fresh start. I do need a fresh start. And if I could make some money in the process. Make money with our money, my dad said flatly. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I said. You wanted me to sell you my apartment for half price so you could use it as a business investment. When I refused, you convinced Mom and Dad that I was being selfish and greedy. I never said you were greedy. You said I was choosing money over family. You were. No, Jake. I was choosing honesty over manipulation. I was choosing to protect Mom and Dad's retirement over funding your business venture. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Other wedding guests were starting to stare. My cousin, the bride, was looking over with concern. Amanda spoke first. Jake, you told me your sister was being unreasonable. You said she was rich and selfish. I'm not rich, I said to her. I'm a nurse. I saved for 5 years to buy that apartment. But you were going to sell it to him for half price and then flip it? Amanda asked Jake. It's not that simple. It sounds pretty simple to me, Amanda said, and I could see her mentally recalculating everything Jake had told her about the situation. My mom sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Jake, how could you lie to us? I didn't lie. I didn't explain everything. You let us think Sarah was being cruel to you, my dad said. You let us damage our relationship with her because you didn't want to admit you were planning to use her apartment as a business investment. I wasn't using anyone. You were using all of us, I said. You used family guilt to pressure me into giving you a discount. You used Mom and Dad's love for you to get them to refinance their house. You used their trust to avoid telling them your real plan. Sarah, that's enough, my mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it enough, Mom? Because for 2 months, you've treated me like I'm a terrible person for refusing to subsidize Jake's business venture. You've made me feel guilty for wanting fair market value for my own apartment. I didn't know, my mom said quietly. You didn't want to know. It was easier to believe that I was being selfish than to consider that Jake might be manipulating the situation. Jake tried one more time. Sarah, I never meant for it to happen like this. How did you mean for it to happen, Jake? I thought maybe you'd want to help me succeed. I do want to help you succeed. But not by giving you a $200,000 head start that I can't afford. You could afford it. No, I couldn't. That money is my down payment for my house. That money represents 5 years of savings and sacrifices. That money is my future, not your business opportunity. Jake looked around the table, maybe realizing for the first time that everyone was staring at him with disappointment rather than sympathy. I think I need some air, he said, and walked away. Amanda followed him, but I could see her shaking her head as they left. My parents stayed at the table, both looking stunned. Sarah, my dad said finally, I owe you an apology. We both do, my mom added. We should have listened to you. I should have explained earlier, I said. I should have told you what I suspected instead of just refusing to sell. You shouldn't have had to, my dad said. We should have trusted you. You should have asked more questions, I agreed. Jake was asking you to risk your retirement for his business venture, and you didn't even know that's what it was. We thought we were helping him get his life together, my mom said. Maybe you were. But not the way you thought. The rest of the wedding was awkward but not hostile. Jake and Amanda left early. My parents and I had a long conversation about family dynamics and boundaries and the difference between helping and enabling. But the real revelation came 3 days later when Amanda called me. Sarah, I need to tell you something about Jake. What is it? After the wedding, he told me the truth about everything. Not just the apartment, but other things too. What other things? He's been lying to me about his job situation. He told me he was between positions, but he was actually fired 6 months ago. He's been living off money he borrowed from your parents. How much money? $15,000. He told them it was for a security deposit and moving expenses, but he's been using it to pay his credit card bills. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. Amanda, I'm so sorry. There's more. He's been telling people that he's a real estate investor. He's been using the apartment situation as proof that he has connections in the business. He's been trying to get people to invest in his flipping ventures. Has anyone actually invested? 2 people. Small amounts, but still. He took their money and spent it on personal expenses. That's fraud. I know. I broke up with him yesterday. But I wanted you to know that you were right about everything. Jake wasn't just manipulating you. He was manipulating everyone. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment, my sold apartment that I'd be moving out of in 2 weeks, and thought about family dynamics and truth and the stories we tell ourselves. For 32 years, I'd been part of a family system that protected Jake from consequences. We'd made excuses for his failures, covered his debts, and enabled his irresponsibility because we loved him and wanted him to succeed. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's codependency. And Jake had learned to exploit that codependency to get what he wanted. The apartment situation wasn't really about real estate. It was about power and manipulation and the stories families tell themselves to avoid uncomfortable truths. I moved into my new house 3 weeks later. It's smaller than I'd originally planned, but it's mine. I have a yard for the dog I'm adopting next month. I have a guest room for friends who want to visit. I have a life that's not defined by my role as the responsible daughter who fixes everyone else's problems. Jake disappeared for a while after the wedding. My parents heard from him occasionally, but he'd stopped asking for money. I heard through the family grapevine that he'd moved to another city, supposedly for a new job opportunity. The people who'd invested in his flipping ventures eventually got their money back when my parents found out about it and covered the debts. But Jake burned those bridges along with several others. My relationship with my parents improved slowly. They started asking more questions about Jake's requests for help. They started setting boundaries. They started treating me like a daughter instead of a bank account. But the damage was done. The apartment situation had revealed something about our family dynamic that couldn't be unseen. For decades, we'd all played roles that weren't healthy or sustainable. I'd been the responsible one who never needed help. Jake had been the struggling one who deserved extra support. My parents had been the fixers who solved problems with money and excuses. The truth was messier and more complicated than any of us had wanted to admit. 6 months after I moved into my new house, Jake called me. He was living in Phoenix, working at a call center, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates. He sounded different. Humbler. More honest. Sarah, I need to apologize. For what specifically? For the apartment thing. For lying to mom and dad. For making you feel like you were being selfish when you were just being fair. Thank you. I've been thinking about it a lot. About how I handled everything. About how I treated you. And I realize I was using people. Not just you, but mom and dad too. Amanda. Even those investors I told you about. What changed? I went to therapy. Court-ordered, actually. I got in some trouble with credit card fraud. Jake. I'm okay. I'm getting help. But part of the process is making amends to people I've hurt. I appreciate that. I know I can't undo the damage. But I want you to know that I understand now. What I did was wrong. What I asked you to do was wrong. And I'm sorry. It was a start. Not a solution, not a guarantee that Jake had changed permanently, but a start. We talked for an hour. Jake told me about his therapy, his job, his struggles with money and responsibility. I told him about my house, my dog, my new life as someone who didn't have to manage everyone else's problems. Sarah, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? I thought about it. Yeah, I think I am. Good. You deserve to be happy. So do you, Jake. But not at other people's expense. I know. I'm learning that. We've talked a few more times since then. Jake is still in Phoenix, still working at the call center, still sharing an apartment with roommates. He's paying his own bills, building his credit back up, living within his means. My parents visit him occasionally. They've learned to say no to his requests for money. They've learned to ask questions about his plans and motivations. They've learned the difference between helping and enabling. And I've learned that family loyalty doesn't mean sacrificing your own financial security for someone else's business venture. It doesn't mean accepting guilt and manipulation because you love someone. It doesn't mean playing a role that isn't healthy or sustainable. Real family loyalty means telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable. It means setting boundaries even when people don't like them. It means refusing to participate in dysfunction even when you're called selfish for doing so. The apartment sold for $420,000. I used that money to buy my house, and I've never regretted it. Every morning when I wake up in my own bedroom, in my own house, with my dog sleeping at the foot of my bed, I remember that I made the right choice. I chose honesty over manipulation. I chose boundaries over codependency. I chose my own financial security over someone else's sense of entitlement. And I chose to believe that real love doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. The family dynamics that enabled Jake's behavior didn't develop overnight, and they didn't disappear overnight either. But acknowledging them was the first step toward changing them. My parents still struggle with the balance between helping and enabling. They still want to fix Jake's problems, but they're learning to ask better questions and set clearer boundaries. Jake still struggles with money and responsibility, but he's learning to manage his own problems instead of making them everyone else's responsibility. And I'm learning that being the responsible one doesn't mean being responsible for everyone else's choices and consequences. The apartment situation taught me that family systems are complicated, that love can be manipulative, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's dysfunction. It taught me that fairness isn't selfishness, that boundaries aren't cruelty, and that truth isn't always comfortable but it's always necessary. Most importantly, it taught me that I don't have to choose between loving my family and protecting myself. I can do both. I can care about Jake's success without funding his business ventures. I can support my parents without enabling their enabling. I can be part of a family without losing myself in family dysfunction. The apartment is gone now, sold to a young couple who fell in love with the exposed brick walls and city views. They're probably having friends over for dinner, hanging art on the walls, making memories in the space where I used to live. Jake will probably never own an apartment like that. Not because he can't afford it, but because he's learning to build his life on his own merit rather than family connections and guilt trips. And that's probably the best outcome for everyone involved. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to make their dreams easier than they should be. Sometimes family loyalty means saying no to unfair requests and yes to uncomfortable truths. The people who really love you will understand that. The people who don't, well, maybe that tells you something important about the relationship. My brother wanted my apartment for half price, and when I refused, my family called me greedy. But I learned that greed isn't wanting fair value for your own property. Greed is expecting other people to subsidize your ambitions. I learned that family isn't about who gives you the most. It's about who respects you enough to ask for what's reasonable and accept no for an answer. And I learned that sometimes the most important word in any language is a simple, clear, unapologetic no. What's your take on family dynamics and money? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and financial fairness? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories about real life, real people, and real choices.